Hello everyone, welcome to our Truth Be Told YouTube channel, with your hosts Rick Howard and Mike Maney.
Hello everybody, welcome to our Truth Be Told YouTube page, and this is our 27th, is it? 27th? 27th session, and we're still in the book of Genesis. So we're not going lightning fast on these. We're taking our time trying to share with you many years of study between us. Almost, I think we said one time, we're closing in on 100 years combined.
Yeah, and 80 of that is yours.
But you're older than I am.
I got a late start.
Let me see, what was I? I was 18, I guess, when I announced my call, because I don't know if I've ever surrendered to the call, but
right, I get it. Yeah, that's right. Still kicking and screaming, are you?
I hope to surrender to the ministry one day.
Yes.
So I was 18. How old were you?
I'm going to guess that I was maybe 22, somewhere in there. Yeah. So I was an oldster. I was the elder when I started.
I was already pastoring when I was 22.
Oh man, that thought just scares me to death.
Yeah, I was a pastor at 22.
Wow.
And so Jolene was 19 or 20. And we moved 400 miles away to Beaumont, California.
Wow.
Yeah. Packed up everything we owned in a U-Haul truck. And it wasn't not even the largest one. And that included our VW Bug. Our car was inside the U-Haul truck. And then we packed the car full of stuff inside the truck and then around it.
Yeah.
And headed south.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
We were just kids.
Yes. Yeah.
We were just kids.
Yeah. Well, I was 31 when I began here. I was 31, so I was of the legal age.
Well, I don't know if I was still a novice, but I was. Well, I've been preaching for, 4 or 5 years or something. When I began to pastor, of course, grew up in church, went to a lot of Bible schools and seminary extensions, and
yeah.
That I tell people, by the time I moved to Southern California to pastor Redondo Beach and attended the CMBI seminary, Bellflower, in the mid '80s, I'd already taken enough extension courses. I'd already been through seminary a couple of times.
Yeah.
But never all the way through. They'd have extension seminaries, either extensions from, I don't know if any were extensions from Bellflower, but from Little Rock and from other.
Anything from Fresno? Because they were up and going at that time.
Were they up and going?
I'm
talking about late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, okay.
Well, even before I started preaching.
Okay.
And soon after it. So there would be extension seminary, accredited, or just preacher schools, non-accredited. Mm-hmm. Probably from the whole time I was 13 or 14, I was encouraged to attend those. So I was just a kid.
Yes.
I remember we used to have them in every other Saturday morning in the basement of Airport Church when Richard Harless was still the pastor. And Art Harris and Lee Wright, Leonard Buttram, and he'd have other men come in and teach. Mm-hmm. But he also taught. Mm-hmm. And I'd ride my bicycle over there. In fact, they made me the school treasurer when I was like 14 or something like that. So every business meeting at Airport Church, which was every month, every business meeting, I would stand up and give a treasurer's report for the school that we sponsored. And I'd say something like, we took in $3.15.
Yeah.
and we spent $1.85 on donuts.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
and it leaves a balance of $1 something.
Yeah. Which we then spent on comic books.
But there and all over Northern California.
Wow.
We'd drive all over the place. Anytime a new Bible school or extension seminary would start, within a couple of hours drive, we'd go to it.
Oh man!
And I would go to it even before I was preaching, and most of them, how preachers are, they have big ideas.
Yeah.
So they'd promote it and want everyone to come, and a lot of them, I remember, there'd be like 15 or 20 people the first few sessions.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months later, it'd be like 2 or 3. And but I usually stayed with them.
Yeah.
And then they'd either decide to just let it die out because so few were attending, or as often the teachers, the pastors, would start squabbling with each other.
Oh.
And so it stopped because of that.
Yeah.
But so for at least 10 years or more before I even attended CMBI, I was pretty much constantly going to some type of preacher school, extension seminary.
Wow.
So, and then I went to CMBI, and because I was pastoring, because I'd already attended most of those classes anyway, gone through them. Yeah. And I didn't know how long I would be in seminary. I didn't know how long I could afford it. Their income was pretty small. Yeah. I started in third and fourth year classes. I had to get special permission.
Oh, wow.
And they let me start with third and fourth year classes. And then I worked my way backwards. It's my whole life.
I've done life, Now, what year was that stint at CMBI? Because I left in 82.
And I think I started in 83. And so I went for 4 or 5 years. And by the time I left Redondo Beach and came back to Modesto, I had taken every class for my degree except first year basic English. I hadn't taken that because I heard that's the last class I would need. I'd taken plenty in high school and college. Yeah. And so I am still a first year English class short of my seminary degree.
Oh my goodness.
I contacted Fresno after I moved up here to see if I could just take the final, just challenge it,
Challenge it, yeah.
And just to say I'd finished seminary.
Yeah.
I didn't really care about the degree part or certificate on the wall or anything, but just to say I'd finished it.
Yeah. Well, I sure regret that we weren't there at the same time.
Yeah, I am too. And I wish we'd gotten to know it. I went to Redondo Beach in 81. We had a couple years to get to know each other, and we just never did.
Yeah.
You were part of the stinking co-ops, and I was part of the dirty.
Yeah. The Hatfields and the McCoys.
So I contacted Fresno about just taking the final so I could say I finished seminary. Mm-hmm. But they had a pretty hard and fast rule, and I understand. Oh. They said, we don't let you say you finished a course without attending in person.
Oh, wow. Was that Bill Fritz? Was he involved then, or?
I forget. Oh. I forget. This would have been 1989 or 90 or something like that. Okay. And, I wasn't going to drive to 2 hours each way. Yeah. A couple of times a week just for first year English class.
Well, I will say this, that by the time you opened the doors at CMBI, you had a much better grasp on the whole concept of the Bible than probably 3/4 of the student body.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I told you the story before how I first met K.D. Ward.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you already
first year attending. I took his. I took a Greek class from him, and I took. I forget what class it was.
Was it Bible analysis?
Bible analysis.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So my first day class, we just met, and classroom full of people, probably 12, 15 people. And he gets up, walks over and shuts the door. He said, with what I have to talk about today, the door needs to be closed. I thought, I like this man already. And so he looks at all of us. Most of them were younger than me or just surrendered to preach or, lay members or something. And so he says, can anyone tell me what covenant theology means? So I'm sitting there kind of just waiting for someone to answer the question, I wait a little bit and no one. So I raised my hand.
Yeah. You were waiting to counterpunch, but no one threw it.
I just thought, I don't know, I guess everyone knew.
Yeah.
And so he called on me and I gave my explanation. As I was giving my explanation, his eyes were getting bigger and bigger, like, who is this guy? Where did he come from?
Nice.
And from that moment on, we became good friends.
Yeah.
But it's, I think it was just very pleasing to both of us that we had not known each other, and yet we had come to the same conclusions.
Yes.
And
well, that's how you and I bonded so quickly, is because for that very reason. We didn't know each other, but when we started to compare notes, we go, wow.
Yeah, and that was in the prehistoric days before email, before internet, before smartphones, before texting.
Yeah.
We actually had to call each other on a hardwired phone with the cord sitting on the desk, or mail each other stuff.
Yeah. That's the old days, wasn't it?
It seems like dinosaur days, doesn't it?
It does. Yes.
So you had to make a little more effort to develop a relationship back then.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know how I got off on that.
Well, that's exciting, I'll tell you. Now we're enjoying the fruits of your 80 years of Bible.
Oh, that's right. That's why I got off on that. 100 years. So we have almost a combined 100 years of Bible study officially as preachers.
Yeah.
That doesn't include, in my case, I grew up in church.
Yes.
And so I was been exposed to it for 60 plus years. And I hesitate saying all this because people say, well, if you really went through 2 or 3 seminary stretches worth and you grew up in church and you've been studying yourself all those years, how come you don't know more? So,
there's always going to be that one person out there that says that.
So we hope all of this does not come across as braggadocious.
No, not at all.
Obvious that we should know more than we do after all this time. But the Lord is merciful and gracious, and He knows that He knows He has to bring us along slowly. Anyway,
so today we'll share with everyone what we don't know.
Yeah. So I am Rick Howard in Modesto, California, and I've been talking to Mike Maney in Missoula, Montana. And we've been doing these for close to a year now. And our primary text is Luke 24, 27, 26, 27. I've quoted so many times that beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And we're going through the Old Testament, looking for Christ and the gospel and the effects of the gospel in the people of God. And we're enjoying it. We hope our viewers are as well.
Yes.
But I was, along the way, looking at all the way back even to Cain and Abel and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I thought of this. There's a principle that we've really been dealing with, that even in the life of Joseph, before prison and after prison to a certain degree. I was thinking of that verse, Hebrews 10:9. He takes away the first that he may establish the second. And that's talking about the old covenant, new covenant. There's a principle that we've really been going through that we haven't really brought up yet. And that is that foundation under that, the idea under it of, first Cain, but Abel really took his place as a man of God. Even like in the name change of Abram to Abraham, he takes away the first that he may establish the second.
Yeah.
Because the second is what he really desires. The first needs to be taken away.
Yeah.
And we really saw that in Jacob being changed to Israel. We could even go back Esau. We talked about changing from being an Esau to a Jacob. So he takes away the first that he may establish the second. But even further, he takes away Jacob that he may establish Israel. And to some degree, we're seeing that in Joseph. But, you could even apply it to like Moses and Joshua. For whatever reason in God's mind, and we know the reason given about striking the rock the second time, but for some reason it was important to do away with the first, as great as Moses was.
Yeah.
To establish the second, Joshua.
It's almost like the first, it's rigid, it's law, it's rule, it's hard and fast, it's cut and dry, it's life or death. When it's like, I really don't want to go there, but I have to, because I'm dealing with humanity. So I have to lay all that down. But really what I want is grace and mercy. And so I slide in the new covenant, or I slide in the second born, so
exactly.
it's almost like he breaks
kind of what I'm
rule.
thinking.
Yeah.
Is that the firstborn status was often taken for granted, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so he often God had to do away with the first, as far as order of birth.
Yeah.
That he might establish the second, and the second became the first.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we could even talk about Saul and David. He allowed Saul, even though it wasn't his primary choice or his desire ahead of time, but he allowed it to happen. And Saul was big and tall and strong and handsome and the whole thing. Pleasing to the flesh.
Yeah. But it was the people's choice.
The people's choice, So he had to do away with the first to establish the second.
Yeah.
And even like Moses and Joshua that we just talked about, it took both of them to really be a complete picture of Christ. Moses more his first coming, and Joshua more his second coming. The conqueror. And
then back to Saul and David, people's choice versus the man after God's own heart.
Yes.
So it's like it's what God really wants, but he's forced to frame things into a certain way because of their rebelliousness or their stubbornness, but he really doesn't want to, or only for a while anyway. So I like that, Prince. That's a good foundation. You're right.
Well, I mean, he takes away the first Adam so that he could have the last Adam.
Yes. Yeah.
And he takes away the flesh.
Yeah.
He wants to. Yeah. So that he can establish a spirit.
Yeah. And it's not a mistake or an afterthought. It's really just to extend his mercy and to show he's willing to go the distance and go further than just the primary rule of law, to go beyond that and show his love. Yeah, that's good thoughts. So you really do know more than it appears.
I just kind of swerved into that thought a little bit.
I like that thought. I do.
But we left Joseph. We're going through the life of Joseph, and session number 26 brought him up to the place of being put into prison. But I was thinking a little bit more about that coat of many colors that his father had made him as his favorite son, and how that Christ really wears, in a spiritual sense, doesn't he, a coat of many colors. We could talk about the coat of many colors being the levels of his glory, majesty, all of that. Or we could talk about a coat of many colors of his many names and titles. It takes a coat of many colors with Christ to describe him thoroughly. He's not just one color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Many colors. What I was really thinking of with this idea of a coat of many colors is the word in a couple of New Testament verses, manifold, like Ephesians 3:10, that to the church has been given the manifold wisdom of God. And manifold means many, like many colors.
Yes.
It means, but it has the idea of woven or knit, blended together. So all of the wisdom of God is manifold. There's many aspects to it, and it's all blended into one term called the wisdom of God. Mm-hmm. But Paul makes sure he calls it the manifold wisdom of God, many-sided, variegated. Yeah. Some translations say.
Line upon line, precept upon precept.
And then even Peter uses it, 1 Peter 4:10, where he talks about the different gifts that God has given to you in the church. You are to share them with the others, minister to them as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Mm-hmm. So his grace has many aspects to it too. So just that, from that basic idea of the coat of many colors, really caused Joseph to stand out as different, even in appearance. Mm-hmm. You could recognize him immediately. Mm-hmm. There's something about Christ where he stands out. He has a coat of many colors that's beautiful, radiant, multi-layered and colored. There's just so much about him that a coat of one color just wouldn't do the job.
Yeah, you could also look at the breastplate of the priest and how all those 12 colors.
So that was a coat of many colors, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as high priest, he will be over that as well. Yeah. Plus, he'll be over all the nations.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. I'm glad you. That's a perfect example. That breastplate. Mm-hmm. So Joseph ends up in prison and under false charges, and a verse came to my mind about him being in prison. We kind of joked last week about we each came up with a list of about a dozen types of Christ.
Yeah.
I found someone online who had 65, and one who had 70 or something like that. Like they're trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
So we don't want to press all these too much, but this idea of God was with him in prison. Mm-hmm. So how do we apply that to Christ? Well, I thought of that verse over there in 1 Peter 3:19. Between his death and resurrection, says he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Mm. So he was in prison in a real sense, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Just like Joseph was.
Yes.
But he was doing a good deed, he was being a blessing even in prison, just like Joseph was. Joseph found favor in the eyes of the man in charge of the prison, and he put Joseph over everything.
Yeah.
So Christ was doing a good deed during his time in prison. His time of death is kind of likened to a prison in some ways. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of an example of that. So he's in prison and he finds favor, and we know the story of the butler and the baker were also cast into prison. Pharaoh must have had like a really foul mood one day, because it wasn't just the butler and baker; it was the chief butler, who was the same as the cupbearer, like Nehemiah was. So the chief cupbearer, to make sure the king doesn't drink any poison. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's quite a job to have, isn't it? Yes, if I die, the king knows not to drink it. But the chief butler and the chief baker. So the two guys in charge of all of his beverages and his food.
Yeah.
Those are two key positions.
Yeah.
And you don't want to just get rid of those two guys for no reason.
Yeah.
He was going to take their place and deliver as good a quality as they did. But for whatever reason, he must have had a meal that he just didn't like or something.
Yeah.
The cook put the wrong spice in. not enough salt or something. Who knows?
I'll bet there wasn't a lot of applications after that coming in.
Yeah, I don't want that job. But they had offended their king.
Yeah.
It says in chapter 40, verse 1. So they did something to offend him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just, he didn't just do it on a whim or just because he's in a foul mood. So he throws him in prison. And of course, this story in chapter 40, it's easy, especially under this subject, we're looking at the Old Testament, looking for Christ and the gospel and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be easy just to skip over this chapter. But chapter 40 is a great chapter about the providence of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If these two guys came into prison at the same time Joseph was in prison.
Yeah.
And this is, if it wasn't for this, Pharaoh later would not have found out that Joseph was an interpreter of dreams.
Yes.
And then Joseph would not have been elevated.
Yeah.
Now, in the providence of God, God could have done it another way, because it was God's purpose to elevate Joseph to the position he later came into. But this is how God brought it about. So the providence of God does not always mean that God causes events in order to bring out a desired results. It can also mean he simply enters into events that are already happening.
Yes.
And bring about his purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. He uses the human experience that is going to unfold pretty much on his own, but he guides through it.
Yes.
He just guides the process. And a lot of times when you look for the weird, like you said, he must have had a really bad day. A lot of times where the hand of God is at work is in the really strange, offbeat things that happen out of nowhere. So often that's the hand of God. It just wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah, it's. I often remind people here at Liberty that we just don't know. Did God cause this or not?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's okay to ask the question, but if we're not careful, if we go too far one way in the direction of God's causing everything, and then we quote Romans 8:28. If you're not careful, you're going to end up blaming God for terrible things happening in your life.
Yeah.
Some things he just allows to happen. Some things he causes to happen.
Yeah.
And some things he just enters into after they happen.
Yeah.
To bring about a good result.
Yeah.
We don't just, I've seen people get angry and bitter, resentful toward God because they have too much of that attitude.
Yeah.
Something terrible happens, and I'll hear people say, well, I know God must have a purpose in it. Well, he does have a purpose in it. He can bring about a good purpose in it. But, if you're not careful, you're going to be blaming God for purposely bringing terrible things into your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes he might, because he knows that's what it's going to take. But other times, sin causes a lot of terrible things to happen.
Yeah.
And God's able to enter into those terrible things and bring good out of it. And I just warn people not to get to a place where you end up blaming God. Yeah. Because then you're going to get resentful and quit.
I think of the prodigal son in that story. Granted, it's a parable, but the principles there that this young boy, left, and he found himself in that situation based on poor decisions, and so he ends up eating, hog food, and basically in the hog pen, stroking the hog, and then comes to realize, hey, I'm in this situation because of my own stupidity. But
the Father didn't cause that to happen.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But the end result was the Father brought good out of it.
Yeah. When he changed his mind and got his head, straight, then some good could. But yeah, you're right. People make dumb mistakes, poor decisions, and then blame God for it.
Blame God.
instead of thanking him for helping them through it or bringing them out of it, giving him a second chance.
So the butler and the baker are put in prison with Joseph. And I like what verse 4 says. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them.
Yeah.
Joseph served them.
Yeah.
Here's Joseph, who had a right to have a bitter spirit more than anyone, betrayed by his brothers, betrayed by Potiphar's wife, all these unjust things happening to him. And this butler and baker, why should he do anything for them?
Yeah.
He was put in charge of them, but a lot of people in charge can be mean to those they're put in charge of. Mm-hmm. And so just the fact that he was put in charge of them was one thing, but he chose to use that position to serve them. I just find that very interesting. And it's a good reminder for us that when we are in the middle of an unpleasant circumstance that maybe we did nothing to deserve, it just came upon us. That's what happens in life.
Yeah, yeah.
We can still serve people.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a way that we could not without that experience.
Exactly.
So that's, of course, we're probably both thinking of Philippians 1, Paul.
Yeah.
Of, whether I'm in bonds or in chains or not, whether I'm in prison or not.
Yeah, you read my mind. Yeah. Because
some people are using it for good. Some people are using it for evil, hoping to add chains, add to my bonds.
Yeah.
But he said, whatever reason they're doing it for, at least they're out there preaching Christ, all because I'm here in prison.
Yeah.
To have a perspective like that's pretty amazing. Isn't
it is. I mean, it's less stressful and it's beneficial for others. And I would say that Joseph had a shepherd's heart. God would use that tenderness, that humility, when he came to power. Actually, before he came to power, before he was promoted out of prison, God gave him the vision to help Egypt. And so, but he had that spirit of wanting to help instead of being bitter in the whole situation, and that's the kind of spirit that, of course, pastors should have too, is that humble servant shepherd heart. Mm-hmm.
I like that idea because Joseph basically was a pastor of the prisoners, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He didn't see it as I am in charge of them. Mm-hmm. He saw it as I am a servant to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of my position.
Yeah.
And isn't that what Peter said to the pastors? Mm-hmm. Not as overlords.
Yeah.
But shepherds, but servants.
Yeah.
Humble.
What's that other verse, Brother Rick?
The verse.
I think it's something like
not as being lords over God's heritage.
Well, I'm thinking of make friends of mammon so that when you're in a pickle,
I don't think it uses the word pickle.
Well, it doesn't use the word pickle. Okay.
No, I don't think pickle's in there.
This is the NIV.
The MIV.
The MIV.
Mike's International Version.
Yes. So they'll help bail you out. So he was kind to them. So he helped them.
He helped them, but they didn't help him until Pharaoh needed find someone to interpret his dream.
Yes.
But Joseph had asked him to remember him before Pharaoh. And
and if he had been mean to them, you think he would have?
The chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot.
Right. There's always one in every crowd,
So they both had dreams, and I keep wanting to say Daniel because these verses remind me so much about Daniel's response to interpreting dreams. At the end of verse 8, do not interpretations belong to God. That's Daniel, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then when Pharaoh brought him out of prison to interpret his dream, he said in 41:16, Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer."
Yeah.
So he gives all the credit to God, like Daniel did. But both of them remind us of Christ. How often did Christ say, especially in John's Gospel, "I can do nothing except my Father.
Yeah.
It's not my doctrine; it's my Father's doctrine."
Yeah.
He gave all the credit to the Father.
Yeah.
So, in a real sense, Joseph and Daniel both are types of Christ, in that they acknowledge that it's not of them; it's of God.
Yeah.
And even though Jesus was God, he still gave the credit.
Yeah. But he knew his audience, and he knew that they were more all about God than they were the Son of God, because obviously they were having issues with him. And so he tried to connect them to God through him. It's not my doctrine, like you just said, it's my Father's. Well, the Father they would listen to. Where the disconnect was is the words he was saying was of the Father, but they were not listening. But he tried to identify himself to his Father. And so Joseph is trying to say, look, it's not me, it's the one true living God. And so he's trying to connect them to that one true living God, so that he gets the credit for it.
So they have their dreams, and Joseph interprets their dreams, and the interpretation came true in both. So his interpretation was a prophecy of the future. And certainly Christ said a lot about the future in prophecy. And it will come to pass exactly as Jesus prophesied. So there's a similarity there as well. But the butler forgot about Joseph and left him in prison. And so he was in prison for 2 full years. And then Pharaoh had his famous dreams. One about the cows, the healthy cows, and the not so healthy cows. And then the 7 heads of grain, and 7 that the grain was not so healthy, not so full. And of course, that's the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. And if you destroy, if there's a famine in the grain, there's going to be a famine in the meat in the cows. That's one of their primary foods. So it was going to be a terrible time. And finally, he hears about this Hebrew man in verse 12. And so the Pharaoh fetched him. And of course, he interpreted the dream. And we see all through chapter 41 his rise to power because of this. And he not only interpreted the dreams, which is one thing, but he gave the solution. And that's what really impressed Pharaoh. He said in verse 32, the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice because the thing is established by God. And God will shortly bring it to pass. So he wanted to let him know the 7 good years will not be because you are such a wonderful Pharaoh. And you understand everything about agriculture, because that's the kind of nature of the leader. Can be a president, takes credit for all the great things going on, blames the other president, for all the bad things. And he wanted Pharaoh to know God's behind all this, so that when there is the famine, you'll know it's not just happenstance because of climate change, global warming or something, but it's the hand of God. And so verse 33, and not that Moses was thinking of himself here, but his solution was, now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. So if you collect 1/5 and set it aside, in 7 years, you're going to have not just 7 years worth, but you're going to have, like 10 years worth or something like that, whatever it works out to.
Yeah.
Which means, and if you know ahead of time, there's only going to be 7 years of famine, and you have enough to feed your own people for those 7 years, and then you have all this left over, then of course there's a money opportunity there, isn't it? Joseph said it's going to happen over a large area, not just Egypt. People are going to come to you for food. You're going to be able to sell it to them, and you're going to become even more wealthy than you are now. So that was pretty good news to hear.
Yeah, I'm sure that was appealing to the government.
So the advice was good in verse 37 in the eyes of Pharaoh, the eyes of all his servants, and of course this is a great preaching verse in verse 38. To challenge the men in your church to preach at an ordination of a new pastor, a deacon or something, or just in general. But Pharaoh said to his servants, verse 38, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" Boy, that's what every pastor desires to be, and that's what every pastor desires to have other men in his church to be.
Yeah.
I think you have some, and I have some.
And then when they sought out deacons, they wanted to make sure that they were Spirit-filled, leaders. Yeah.
Not just that they knew how to take out the garbage at a potluck, but that they know how to give good advice, counsel to the pastor, to the church. They may primarily do physical things, take care of physical needs, but they are to be spiritual men doing it. So Pharaoh asked the question, and the answer becomes obvious. It's the one looking at him. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there's no one as discerning wise as you. You shall be over my house." So here he is, elevated again, elevated in his own father's house with the coat of many colors. He was elevated in Potiphar's house by being placed over all that he had. He was elevated in prison. Now he's elevated by Pharaoh.
And this is over a stretch of how many years have we figured, roughly?
So far, this would be, I think this would be like 15 years so far, because we haven't had the 7 good years yet.
So two primary promotions in the space of, say, 15 years?
Well, actually,
Well, 3 if you count Potiphar's house, right?
Yes. And even before that, by his father with the coat of many colors. So at least 4 elevations. By the time he's about 30 years old. Pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
So he says in verse 41, "I've set you over all the land of Egypt." Well, this is kind of, it was accomplished in his first coming, Christ's first coming, by his death and resurrection and ascension. But it's really more of a second coming kind of picture here, isn't it? Being set over all the land as ruler. Pharaoh took a signet ring off his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him in garments of fine linen. Boy, he keeps getting these really nice garments, doesn't he? Either many colors or fine linen.
I'm telling you.
And of course, garments of fine linen. What do you start thinking of right there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Christ as the groom and his bride as the bride. His bride as the bride.
And the fine linen. Yeah.
Fine linen, clean and white.
Wow.
So there it is.
And really, this is, again, it's the God of the Hebrews being recognized by a major nation. And all throughout, where God's hand has been involved in these other nations, it's been the elevation, whether it's Esther Mordecai, or whether it's Jonah being sent there. All these other nations that God's dealing with, it's all points to the one true and living God over their other gods. And it's prophesied a number of times in the Old Testament that God is going to eradicate all the names of these idols that the nations have fabricated over the years, and He's just going to expunge all those names, so they won't even be around to even be pronounced in the future, because He's a jealous God.
Yes, He is. And once Pharaoh set him up, elevated him to this lofty position, the decree that was to be sent out to everyone was the dream that Joseph had before he was sent to Egypt. In verse 43, bow the knee, but not just his brothers and his father, but everyone. So, of course, we immediately think of Philippians 2, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. Bow the knee. So he set him over the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to him, I am Pharaoh, without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Christ said that the Father has given me all authority.
Yes.
Even to judge in the judgment day.
Yeah.
And then Pharaoh gave him a wife, daughter of a pagan priest. This is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And from this pagan priest's daughter came
Ephraim, Manasseh,
the firstborn.
Yeah.
Blessing of the firstborn.
Yeah.
Was given to Ephraim.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
But just as interesting, I mean, if you say that, why would God do that? It was Joseph. It's about Joseph, though. It's not about even Ephraim. But it was because of Joseph. But the other part of the birthright blessing that went to Judah, and yet what did Judah do back in chapter 38? With that great sin we talked about last week.
Oh, Tamar.
With Tamar, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking too that. Do you think that this pagan wife could be pointing to Jesus being wed to those coming from the nations?
That's exactly what I think.
Yeah.
It shows the larger purpose of God.
The larger,
that's focused within Israel in the Old Testament is really much larger than that. It's the whole world.
Yeah.
And that even those of the pagan nations shall come into this blessing because she did as his wife.
Yeah. So back to your earlier thought about the number 2 sliding in that number 1 position.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Yeah.
And so she had Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh was born first, but it was Ephraim that received the birthright blessing. And that's a great story, isn't it? How I like that story.
Yeah. Because,
we're giving all the credit. We kind of hammered Jacob. We were tough on Jacob.
Right, we were. Yeah.
We're being really nice toward Joseph as the godly one.
Yeah.
But, Jacob had changed to Israel. And when he was about ready to die, an old, broken down man, and he said, bring your 2 boys here. So to get the blessing, and Joseph purposely had Ephraim on his left hand, approaching his father, so that Jacob's right hand, Manasseh, so that Jacob's right hand of blessing would be on Manasseh.
Yeah.
And he had Ephraim on his right hand, which would be Jacob's, getting all mixed up.
Yeah.
Jacob's left hand.
Yeah.
because he was the second born.
Uh-huh.
So Joseph brought the boys in the way he did in each hand.
Yeah. He positioned them according to what
expecting.
Yeah.
And my point is, we make Joseph the more spiritually insightful man.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Jacob, it was Israel, it was his old father.
Yeah.
Who in that case at least had a better understanding of God's purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he purposely switched his hand over.
Yeah.
And Joseph said, "No, you're old, you're frail, you're dying, you're making a mistake.
Yeah.
I'm trying to help you out here. I'm the one who understands."
Yeah.
And Jacob basically said, "Leave me alone. I know exactly what I'm doing."
And so will Israel have that deeper understanding when the Gentiles are there as the bride.
Mm.
They'll finally see.
Good. It's good,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So, hey, we make a good team.
Well, you're filling in quite a few blanks. I'm leaving some blanks.
Well, you're
jumping in.
You're filling them in really nice. I like to just sit back and listen to you, and I'll just chime in once in a while.
So name the first in verse 51, Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil in all my father's house. He didn't, even again, Joseph, as insightful as he was and prophetic in his view of things, he really didn't know at this point, did he, how all this 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, how God was going to providentially work in that to reunite him with his family.
Yeah.
He didn't.
Yeah.
He said, I've forgotten about my father's house.
Mm-hmm.
I've forgotten about all the terrible things of the past.
Mm-hmm.
In the name of the second, he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction.
Wow.
Boy, isn't that
yes.
It reads like the Psalms, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like it should be a psalm.
Yeah.
And develop a little bit further. God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. I'm thinking about that one psalm that talks about the godly man walks through the valley of Baca, valley of tears, and he makes it a blessing, and he comes out the other side. And sometimes we walk through a valley of tears, a pool of tears. But if we have the spirit of Joseph, like he had in prison even, we can make it a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
We have a shepherd's heart or a servant's heart.
Mm-hmm.
He's made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. He didn't cause Joseph to avoid the land of affliction, but he caused him to be fruitful in the land of affliction.
Yeah.
And that's a hard message we pastors try to get across to our people, don't we?
Yeah. But if you want to gain perspective, you have to have that experience, because that's the teacher. Experience is the teacher, and it brings you to a level of perception or perspective that you wouldn't have had without it. And that's all about the Christian growth. We have to have those negative in order to. Well, I'm thinking of. I'm drawing a blank though, so help me out. Naomi just came to me. She didn't have that perspective until she went through her stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it's like we talked about with Jacob. He needed to be broken. All of us need to be broken.
Yeah.
And we come out the other side maybe with a limp for the rest of our life.
Yeah.
But I don't see where Jacob ever, looking back at that, complained about it.
No.
Because he knew that made him better.
Yeah. So every time he limped, it's a reminder of God.
Mm-hmm.
Every scar that we have is a reminder of God having brought us out of it.
So the 7 good years and then the 7 years of famine come in verse 55. The people began to cry out to Pharaoh for bread.
Mm-hmm.
And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go up to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, do." This is basically what the father tells us about his son.
Yes.
This is my beloved son.
Yeah.
Hear ye him.
Yes.
Elijah's great and Moses is great up in the Mount of Transfiguration.
Right.
But here's the one you need to listen to.
That's right. Yeah.
Not only did he, in verse 56, the famine was over all the face of the earth, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. So even Pharaoh's own people bought from him.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of, you could go a lot of different directions in this, but Joseph was purposely making Pharaoh more powerful and wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
But the people were willing to pay for it, needed to eat. But not just the Egyptians, all countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain.
Yes.
And so this is how God's providential hand begins to work.
Yeah. He really rescues the world, as it were, from its demise by putting in place proper leadership. Everything's done righteously. And so, back to that first and then the second. The first earth was necessary to work out and unfold all of this purpose for man. But it's really, I think, the new earth that God is really, his heart is really in that one, because then everything's just going to be in the past. No more tears, as Joseph realized that those years of suffering were past now.
Good stuff. So there's a famine in Canaan land as well. Jacob looks at his sons. They're older than Joseph, except for Benjamin. So they're in their 30s and 40s or something. Because back in verse 46 of chapter 41, Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. So he was 17 when he sold. So we said 15 years earlier, but it was 13 years, elevated 4 times by the time he was 30. But, the brothers were in their 30s or 40s or 50s, whatever how old they were, but they were grown men. Father's basically saying, what are you looking at me for? You're grown men. Get down there to Egypt. Get us some food.
Haven't I raised you right?
So Joseph's 10 brothers, everyone but Benjamin, went down to Egypt to buy grain. And Jacob wouldn't let Benjamin go because he had a long memory.
Yeah.
Lose his other son from Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says in verse 6, Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came, and what do? We shall never bow down to you. They immediately bowed down. But they didn't know it was Joseph at this point.
No.
But they bowed down. I mentioned last week that this is the first of, I think, 4 times that they bowed down. So he was elevated 4 times, and they bowed down to him 4 times. There's something about that.
Wow.
But Joseph, so they bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. It wasn't just kneeling. It was bowing
right.
all the way down.
Yes.
Prostrate.
Mm-hmm.
We will never bow down to you. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke harshly to them. He said, where do you come from? They said, from the land of Canaan. He recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed. So it's all coming back.
It's all coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all just laying out in front of him. He said, you're spies. And they said, no, my Lord, but your servants have come to buy food. And look what they said in verse 11. We are all one man's son. We are honest men. Is that what the old King James says?
Yeah.
Honest. We are honest men.
Yeah.
He's looking at a bunch of liars. They've been lying for 13 years
Right. Yeah.
to their father that Joseph had died. Oh, we're honest. We'd never tell a lie. We're not spies. Oh, man, it's coming back to bite him, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yep.
They said, your servants, verse 13, are the 12 brothers. The youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. That's about all they could say, because as far as they knew, he could still be alive.
Yeah.
They'd sold him into slavery, so they had no clue that this man in charge of all this was the one they'd sold into slavery.
Yeah.
So Joseph uses it to his advantage. And he says, I'm not going to give you a thing to bring your youngest brother here. And so they were stuck. They didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So he ends up putting them in prison in verse 17 for how long? 3 days. There's that 3.
Yeah.
The principle of 3 that we talked about.
Yeah.
If you are honest men, in verse 19, because he knew they weren't, let one of your brothers be confined to the prison house, but you go carry grain, famine for the famine of your houses. So he wasn't going to let him starve. He wasn't going to let his sisters and his father starve. But they had to agree to leave one and go get Benjamin, bring him back. Of course, they knew among themselves, verse 21, we are truly guilty concerning our brother. So we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us. So you kind of made a joke, about him listening to their plotting when he was in the pit, called out from the pit.
Yeah, right.
How about letting go? Is that what you said?
Yeah, right. Yeah, like he's calling out, let him go. Yeah.
But evidently he was. By what they said here, that he pleaded with us, we would not hear. So evidently he was part of that conversation.
If you think about Jesus' ministry, how many times did he, weep and pled for them to listen to him and to believe on him, but they wouldn't. And one day they are going to. I think you mentioned in another session that they're going to see him coming back, and it's going to hit him. He's gone away for a long time, as Joseph had gone away out of their sight for a long time. And one is not. We don't know where he went, where he is. Well, Yeshua is seated at the right hand of his father. So as far as Israel is concerned, we don't know where he went. We don't know, but they're going to find out.
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to find out.
So we're kind of transferring a little bit toward more of Joseph as a type of Christ in his second coming. So you have a statement in verse 21. We could see it as the national repentance of Israel at Christ's return.
Yeah.
Because they said at the end of it, this distress. Is that what the King James says? Distress? At the end of verse 21?
Distress.
Yes. Which is simply a synonym for trouble or tribulation. That's how it's translated in many other verses.
Yeah.
And will not Israel say, especially during that last half, especially at the return of Christ, this distress, this time of Jacob's trouble came on us.
Yes.
Because we did this to our brother.
Yeah.
They're going to recognize their guilt.
Yeah.
Many verses speak to that. They shall look on him whom they pierced, and they shall weep in repentance, because they will know why this was happening to them.
Yeah.
And they will confess it. And in their case, they will be delivered, just like Joseph delivered his brothers. Whether he actually heard them say this or not, this was their attitude. And Christ is waiting for Israel to have this same attitude.
Yes.
Admission of guilt, confession of sin.
Yeah.
So therefore, this distress has come upon us.
Mm-hmm.
So, you ask the question, why is it a time of Jacob's trouble? Well, because of Genesis 42:21. We are truly guilty concerning our brother. I mean, that really, that preaches, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It sure jumps out.
Boy.
And of course, Reuben has to, as the oldest of the brothers, has to do his famous I told you so. Verse 20, 22. And his blood is now required of us. Isn't that what Israel said? Let his blood be on us and on our children.
Yes.
Boy, it just is amazing when you start looking for it. When you have a mindset of looking for Christ, you see him everywhere, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
But they did not know that Joseph understood them.
Mm-hmm.
So he was listening.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't think he understood their language.
Right.
So he was hearing everything and understanding it.
Yes.
It's funny. Yeah. Jesus knew their hearts. He knew what they were saying. He knew what they were thinking.
Yes.
And they didn't think he understood, but he did.
Yeah.
And it says in verse 24, he turned himself away from them and wept. We have to make another application to Christ at his first coming also. Although I wonder, when the Bible says, Zechariah 12, they shall look on him when they pierced and they shall weep.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Christ is going to weep.
I'm wondering.
Will he weep with them?
Yeah. When you haven't seen someone in a long time and you have that first embrace, there's tears.
Well, isn't the second coming of Christ Joseph's reunion with his brothers?
Yeah. Yes.
And
yes,
they will weep.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph wept. Will Christ weep?
Yeah.
The weeping of Joseph. I came up with it 3 times here, and then 45:2. When he wept aloud, it says 45:2. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. And then in 46:29, when Jacob finally came down and was reunited with Joseph.
Oh, yeah.
Joseph made ready his chariot, went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel, presented himself to him. And I don't think the English language even captures the emotion, the depth of emotion of this, and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while.
I know, yeah.
So much so
that
Jacob was able to say, I can die now, a happy man.
Yeah.
So, and I hope I'm not pressing this too far. I can think of, I may be missing some. I can think of 3. So Joseph wept 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of 3 times Jesus wept. That's recorded.
When Lazarus died?
Certainly at the death of Lazarus.
Over Jerusalem?
He wept over Jerusalem, just like Joseph is weeping over his brethren.
Yeah.
And he wept in the Garden of Gethsemane. Says he began to weep. And Joseph wept 3 times. I'm just trying to make this comparison between the two, and the idea of being reunited with his family. I think a case could be made that Christ may weep at that time also.
Well, if you're looking at him resurrecting Lazarus, that at that moment, the weeping there, of course, when he resurrects, when he returns, and there's a resurrection, and of course, Israel, in a sense, will be resurrected as a nation and brought to him as his people, the remnant, the third that survives.
Mm-hmm.
I've often correlated that third that survived. I think you mentioned this. Was it last session that 2/3 will be destroyed and a
Yeah,
third?
that's Zechariah 13. Yeah.
No, I lost my train of thought. As that third being the ones out in the wilderness that the Antichrist tries to get to, and those are the ones that Jesus preserves and keeps alive. So the other 2/3 are gone. So I've often correlated that final third as those that respond to him, that the remnant, as it were, that see him coming.
Yeah, I think you're onto a good point. We can even tie it in with the story of Joseph and his brothers, that their weeping, their admission of guilt and his weeping and their coming there resulted in them in Goshen, which was their place of protection and provision. And God may well prepare a Goshen for that 1/3. While his wrath is being poured out. They were protected in Goshen when the 10 plagues and the judgments of God during the Great Tribulation reads very similar to the 10 plagues.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And yet he's going to make sure, and that's partly ever how we might interpret it in detail, the sealing of the 144,000.
Yeah.
He says in one place, do not pour out this judgment. Which one of those was it? Until I have sealed my servants. So there is some sort of sealing for protection, for preservation. Kind of a Goshen experience while God is pouring out his wrath. There's a lot more to that than maybe what we're able to bring up right now. But Jesus it was prophesied about Christ in Isaiah 53:3 that he is a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And here Joseph is, some of the weeping is joy of knowing that they're still alive and he might be reunited with them. But part of it, at least the first one here, is partly out of sorrow. That for 13, whatever how many it is, 20, 22 years. He'd been separated from them, and his father had thought he had died. That's sad to think about that.
Yeah. Betrayed by his brothers, they're in a hole, in a pit. That's grief. Being carted off to a foreign land, that's grief. Being accused by Potiphar's wife, thrown in jail, that's a grief. It's just his whole long journey was just this. But yet God brings him right out of it and sets him back on his feet. And now he's in charge.
For Joseph's sake, God blesses the brethren, the brothers.
Yeah.
And we can really say, I know we're to serve God and he blesses our efforts if it's done in humble faith and all that. But there's been many, many Sundays I've prayed before I go preach the sermon at church. Lord, bless me when I preach your word, not because I deserve it.
Yes.
For Jesus' sake.
Yes.
He deserves it.
Yeah.
And really, all good that comes to us from God is because of his sake.
Yeah. We just want what he has laid on our heart to flow through us out into the congregation, because we are dispensing life-giving words, and we just want them to be in the receptive mode to receive that. Wow, this is some good stuff, brother.
So they go back, the 10 brothers go back, and he kept Simeon. And so they go back, they had to tell their father the bad news.
Yes, right.
And they called Joseph without knowing who he was in verse 30, Lord of the land. So they're speaking the truth without knowing it.
Yes. Right.
But we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. So they're recounting this. And
we told them we were honest. Yeah.
So
and now they have to come clean now about Joseph.
Yeah, they had to come clean, and Jacob didn't want to go along with Joseph's demand, because he's afraid he'd lose Benjamin too.
Mm-hmm.
So Reuben speaks up. Verse 37, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, I will bring him back to you. So he puts his own 2 sons up as guarantee. But Jacob still said, my son shall not go down with you. His brother is dead. He's left alone. And he said, not just because I don't trust Joseph, but travel in that days could be very dangerous. And that's what he says in verse 38. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, you bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. But the famine became so bad, and they had to go back get some food. So God's providential hand again, putting this pressure on Jacob. But Judah spoke up in chapter 43 and verse 3. Don't you remember, Dad, that this guy said, you better not come back unless we bring Benjamin with us. And he's not going to sell us any food, no matter how much we pay him. That was the demand he made. So finally, what could Jacob do? He had to agree to it. So he said in verse 13, okay, take your brother also, go back to the man. May God Almighty give you mercy before the man. Interesting.
Yes. It's just the emotion just drips off of the page here. How he, as a father, still grieving over the loss of Joseph, and now, you're dealing with that which is closest to his heart, his kids. Of course, they're grown, but they're still his kids. And when we're in the middle of a situation, we look at it like that, through the human eyes and through all the emotions that are attached. What we're trying to learn is God's view over all of it. And to quit squirming as much as we squirm, that if we trust that God has a grip on our life and oversees the whole thing, this is just one of those teaching moments.
Yeah, it adds an element of peace and calmness to our life, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Sure does.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to figure out a way out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they bring Benjamin down, and Jacob's attitude at the end of verse 14 is, if I'm bereaved, what does the old King James say? At 14. Verse 14.
If I'm bereaved,
of
my children, I am bereaved.
Yeah, he almost just assigns it to fate, huh? This is what has to happen.
Yeah,
kind of like the disciples, Well, if he's going to go to Jerusalem and die, we may as well go with him and die too. Just kind of that little bit of that attitude.
Well, Esther had to come to that, didn't she?
Yes, she did, huh?
Yeah.
This is bigger than myself. This is bigger than my plans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Joseph saw Benjamin with them in verse 16. And they stood before Joseph. They had double the money. And Joseph saw Benjamin, said, take these men to my home, slaughter an animal, make ready. These men shall dine with me at noon. Kind of like a few of those parables, huh?
Yeah.
Wedding parables.
Yes.
Yeah. The fulfillment of it, the marriage supper of the Lamb.
Yeah.
When Jesus is reunited with his brothers, there's going to be a feast.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
But they were afraid, of course.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what Joseph was going to do. And then, Joseph had put a trick played a trick on him and put the money back in there. And so they're afraid he was going to accuse them of theft. And
he wasn't done with them yet.
Yeah, he was having some fun with them.
He was,
bit.
Yeah. I think the more the memories came back to him, the more he goes, oh, okay. I'm going to make him sweat. It's payback. And notice that Jesus doesn't come back until they are in a real sweat. I mean, if they are, I believe they will be hiding out for the fear of their lives. Antichrist is after them, sends just hordes and hordes of armies after them. And there's nothing they can do. They are totally dependent upon him. He's making them sweat.
When the power of the holy people is completely shattered.
Yeah.
At the end of their strength.
Yes.
When finally they're not holding on to their slogan, never again.
Never again. Yes.
Yeah, never again. That's how they live now in their own wisdom and strength.
Yes. Yeah.
Never again.
Never again. Yeah.
And basically the Bible teaches, yes again.
Yes again.
Yes again.
Yeah.
Because not until your heart is rent, not just your abilities in finances and technology and military, all the things you're putting your trust in now, that has to be shattered.
I want you to go sit in that corner and think about what you did. And don't come out until you figure it.
You and your analogies. They fit. So he prepares a meal for them, and they come in, and they're all repentant and humble and hoping to get out of trouble with him. They're afraid he's going to lower the boom on them. But he told them in verse 23, peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. There's something there, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
In him, in whom, Colossians, about Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures, wisdom of God. Yeah. Christ is the treasure chest that God has given to him to give to us.
And I keep referring back to this verse in Jeremiah 3:17. I'll read it again. At that time they shall call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all the nations shall be gathered unto it, to the name of the Lord, to Jerusalem. Neither shall they walk any more after the imagination of their evil heart. So they will have by then learned some great lessons along the way. Okay, yes. And the other one is this one. I like this one, found in Proverbs 8:20 and 21. I lead in the way of righteousness in the midst of the paths of judgment, that I may cause those that love me to inherit substance, and I will fill their treasures. So there's a promise there that we're seeing just foreshadowed here.
So they come to Joseph's house, and Joseph came home in verse 26, and they brought him the present which was in their hand to the house. Boy, there's something there too, isn't there?
Yeah.
We really have nothing that Christ needs, but we are to present him our gift, which is ourself, present our bodies a living sacrifice.
Yeah.
Not that he needs it.
Yeah.
But he still deserves it.
Yeah.
Joseph had no need of their present.
Right.
He was powerful. He was wealthy.
Well, remember when they got off the boat, came to shore, the fire was already going. And the fish the fish that they didn't provide was already on the fire.
Cast your net on the other side. He says. I used that this last Sunday. They were experienced fishermen.
Yes.
They knew the best spots in the Sea of Galilee to fish. They knew the best time of day. Yeah. They knew the best methods. They knew every trick in the book.
Yeah, yeah.
And when he said, cast the net on the other side of the boat, they said, we have been toiling all night and caught nothing. Isn't that a great description of our efforts in the flesh?
Yes.
We have been toiling all night and caught nothing.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, at your command, we'll go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And they caught so much they couldn't even hardly pull the net in.
Wow.
I like that idea of where we toil and toil and toil and toil in our own efforts.
Yeah.
And it just is empty.
Yeah.
Then we simply follow what he says.
Yeah.
And we become full. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's amazing.
So they came and gave him a present. But what they do at the end of verse 26, they bowed down before him to the earth. Mm-hmm. Second time. So he asks about their father, and they tell him. And end of verse 28, they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. So they keep bowing to him. We will never bow down to you.
Yeah.
Well, every time they turn around, they're bowing down to him.
They can't bow enough now.
But I wonder how often we will bow down.
Yeah.
Christ. And will there reach a point where he'll say, you don't need to bow down anymore. Mm-hmm. You're my wife. You don't have to bow down to me all the time. But,
I know the 24. Is it the 24 elders?
Yeah.
Cast their crowns. Cast
their crowns at his feet. So they keep bowing down to him, and then he gets to meet Benjamin, and his very first words that he ever said to Benjamin, "God be gracious to you, my son." Mm-hmm. Pretty good first words.
Yeah.
But his heart yearned for his brother. Joseph made haste, sought somewhere to weep, and he went into his chamber and wept there. So I said 3 times he wept. Maybe there's 4 because I skipped over this one, didn't he? His first meeting with Benjamin. And they were bowing and he was weeping.
Uh-huh.
That's a pretty good picture, isn't it?
Yes.
And they sat before him in verse 33, the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Then he took servings to them before him. But Benjamin's serving was 5 times. That's what
5 times. Yeah.
5 times as much as any of theirs. What do they think at this point? How come his plate is piled high? And what he's given us is plenty.
Yeah.
What he gave Benjamin is like 5 meals worth.
I mean, look at that biscuits and gravy on his plate. It's just piled high.
So, but there is something here about how should we say this? That whatever each person, each child of God deserves, or by grace, or however you want to say it, God's going to give them, but not just a double portion, but 5 times the portion to his beloved one.
Yeah.
The difference of rewards and blessings, the position and all of that. This 3 destiny idea that we like to put forth.
Yeah.
That the destiny of the saved who are not part of the bride, they're going to be happy with what they get because it's going to be more than they deserve.
Yes.
But there's going to be 5-fold, given to that special people.
Yes.
There's a principle there. Maybe I'm pushing all this too much. There's a principle.
You've been faithful over a few things. I'll make you rule over much. Be rule over 5 cities or 10 cities. So it's all right there. It's embedded in there.
Then he tricks him again with the cup in chapter 44. He's really having kind of a fun time with him.
Yes.
But he's trying to get his father down there is what he's trying to do at this point. And see anything stand out to you in chapter 44? I'm trying to move along because we're already going a little long in this session, but I'm sure there's things we'll leave out and skip over. That one of our main purposes in these videos for people to study for themselves and to find golden nuggets of their own. Not just for us to point out everything.
One thing that jumps out at me in chapter 43 in verse 33 was a cultural thing that was pointed out, in that the Egyptians noticed that they sat in their birth order. Something, cultural, apparently to the Hebrews, that was odd to the other nations. And God has his rank and file. God has his special ones who are will be in a birth order. It's all about order with God. And so we'll see that birth order, as it were, in the kingdom. And the other nations, the saved around about, will come to understand that there's an order, a birth order.
Mm-hmm. In verse 14, we can't pass this up so we can have another laugh at their fourth time. Verse 14. So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. They just keep tripping over themselves to bow down to him.
They do.
But he's working toward getting the whole family down there. And he was going to keep Benjamin, which was, of course, was going to break Jacob's heart.
Mm-hmm. And finally reveals himself to his brothers in verse 1, chapter 45. Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he wept aloud. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. Can you imagine? Dismayed doesn't even capture it, doesn't it? We're busted. All these years later, we're busted. Yes. Oh, man.
Joseph said, "Come near me." And they came near, and they were going to do anything he asked because they felt like their lives were on the line. And he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." And then one of the truly great verses, inspirational.
Yeah.
"Now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life."
Yes. Yeah.
The providence of God.
Mm-hmm.
He's not bitter. He's not angry.
No.
Not resentful.
Yeah.
We don't know if he understood it all along. It may have been, took some time to develop in his thinking, but by this time he had a really good understanding.
Yes.
That God's hand was in all this.
Yes. Yeah.
For these 2 years, the famine has been in the land. There are still 5 years in which there'll be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So God sent me. God sent his son to preserve life.
Yes. Yeah.
To preserve a posterity in the earth.
Yeah.
There's that idea of we're tied to the earth.
Yes.
And he's going to have a seed living and ruling on the earth with him.
Yeah.
But it was God who sent. How often did Jesus say, Jesus was willing, of course, but he said, "My Father sent me. I'm on a mission from my Father."
Yeah.
And Joseph was saying the same thing.
And part of Christ's coming was to preserve Israel as a people and the promises made to their forefathers.
So instead of throwing them in prison or killing them.
Yes. Yeah.
He is reconciled to them.
Yeah.
And the fact that Christ would want us to be reconciled to him when it was our sin that killed him.
Well, we were yet enemies.
Yeah, enemies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet he did it to preserve life.
Yeah.
Mm. Verse 14, he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck. So some more weeping that I overlooked the first time through. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. So I have this picture. Have you seen it on Facebook? Because it's really dramatic. The moment, it's the picture of a woman, the moment she sees Jesus in heaven, and her arms are wide open, and she has like this look of awe, and she's weeping,
I haven't seen that one.
It's very emotional.
Oh, wow.
Very emotional.
Wow.
And I'm thinking that this is a picture of us and of Israel at Christ's second coming.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to weep for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Out of sorrow, out of joy. I mean, can you imagine that first Lord's Supper after he returns? We will be taking the Lord's Supper for the first time with full understanding of what those elements mean.
Yeah.
And when he hands us that bread and says, "This is my body which was broken for you," we're going to feel the full weight of his broken body and the full effect of his shed blood. Mm-hmm. And I've often called the Lord's Supper, the atmosphere, I think, is solemn rejoicing. Mm-hmm. We should be solemn because of what it represents. Mm-hmm. But it brings us joy in that what it brought us. Yes. What his death brought to us. Yeah. Yeah. And I think this first Lord's Supper after he returns, and I don't know if we're going to be taking it multiple times, but we'll take it at least one time with him. Mm-hmm. Will there be this mixture of tears of sorrow because we have full understanding now, but also tears of joy because we'll also have full understanding of what it brought to us. Yes. Yeah. And the full picture of redemption, the price of it and the value of it, the cost of it. So I really like these verses that they're all weeping on each other's neck, but then they sit around having a friendly chat. Yeah. Thinking, so at the return of Christ, we're going to have a bunch of tears. Yeah. Yeah. But then we're going to sit down and start what I call our 1,000-year Bible study. Yeah. Yeah. With the one who wrote the book as the teacher. Yeah. It's that Ephesians that says he will show exceeding riches of his grace. Yeah. And the ages to come. Ages to come. Yeah. Ages to come. So not just the millennial age, but in the ages, it's going to. Yeah. I've often thought about that verse. Is it saying that it's going to take, even in glorified bodies, it's going to take ages for him to exhaust everything that's in his word? And if that is the case, then that tells me how we have barely scratched the surface. Yeah. Yeah. This is session number 20. What? And he's probably going to tell you and me, remember in session 27, let me show you how much you left out. Yeah, that we didn't cover. Or overlooked. Right. So I'll be there with a pencil and a notebook, brother. So we think we're like draining everything we can out of this about Christ. And he's going to say, that guy you made fun of that said he had a list of 70? How about 700? Oh boy, we're in trouble.
Well, I think of when he sat those two disciples down at the table, the best they could describe that experience was that they had this burning inside them. This is burning in their bosom. Yeah.
He opened their eyes that they might understand.
Yeah.
And they already knew a lot of the Bible. They were disciples. They probably had a very good working knowledge of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But they still needed their eyes open. And I think at the return of Christ, our eyes are going to be open to a whole lot. We only thought we knew quite a bit about the Bible.
Yeah. Wow, this is rich, brother. This is rich.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit more. I was just going to keep plowing on, but there is, to get to the end of Genesis, the next 4 or 5 chapters, there's just way too much. So we probably ought to call it a close for today. But maybe just a couple more things in chapter 45. Pharaoh said to Joseph in verse 17, "Say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts, depart, go to the land of Canaan, bring your father and your households, come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land." You think Pharaoh appreciated Joseph?
Yeah.
And however we want to make Pharaoh a father figure, if we want to compare it to God the Father in some way, but that, or if we want to make Pharaoh represent the rulers of this age, rulers of the nations of this world, won't they all say in that day, that the credit really goes to Joseph for everything?
Yeah.
Every tongue shall confess.
Yes.
That he is Lord, to the glory of the Father. Everyone's going to basically say what Pharaoh said, whether it's for their eternal good or not. I mean, they'll say it even as unbelievers. They'll have to confess the truth about Christ. So Pharaoh's confessing the truth about Joseph. It's not like a person like Pharaoh to give the credit to someone else.
Yeah.
Especially one not of his blood.
Yeah.
And yet he's given the credit to Joseph. That's a big statement right there.
Well, because Pharaoh regarded himself as a god, as a deity. So this really is something on his part to give such acknowledgement.
So bring them all here. I'll take care of them. Not only will I take care of them, I'll give them the best.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they went back to get Joseph, and they told him in verse 26. It's such a uplifting, happy verse. Joseph is still alive. He is the governor over all the land of Egypt. Jacob's heart stood still because he did not believe them. Well, what's going through Jacob's mind? Okay, you're shocked, number one. You're thrilled, number two.
Yeah.
But then the wheels start turning. What really happened back there?
Yes.
He told me he was dead. So they're not really confessing it right here, but it's like it's starting to all come out in the open, isn't it?
Just hurry up, get in the wagon, let's go. Don't think about it.
Yeah, Dad, don't think about that.
Don't think about that.
He's alive and we're going to get the best. That's all you need to think about.
Yeah.
They may even try to continue part of the lie by saying, well, we just found his coat dipped in blood. So I'm not quite sure. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. So back there when it said he refused to be comforted, now he's comforted.
Yes. Yeah.
And there are things that happen in our lives that we just can't receive much comfort from.
Yeah.
But when we're reunited with our Joseph, our spirit will revive. Then Israel said, "It is enough." I don't need to know the whole story. I'm just glad he's alive.
Yeah.
Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's on his way to Egypt. So we'll leave it there, and maybe by next session we'll be able to finish Genesis. But that the final blessing of prophecy of Jacob to his sons in chapter 49, there's a lot in that. So I'm not sure, but we'll do our best.
Okay.
And I'm sure maybe there'll be a few things we'll recall from the previous chapters that we need to correct.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I listen to myself later and I think, did I really say that? So obviously wrong.
I haven't heard anything wrong.
And we may see a few more things that we overlooked that we'll bring up at first, but thank you for your help.
Wow, this is another good session. My son Andrew said that he was on session number 6, and he was just really floored. And I want to say, well,
what does that say about what was his opinion of us before that?
Not much. No,
Andrew, what was it?
Yeah, what was it?
Yeah, session number 27.
Yeah. Well, I told him, I said, they've just been getting better and better. And it seemed like we, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out there, say, from session 20 forward has just been just phenomenal, just as we're just.
Well, it's so interesting how way back in the book of Genesis, we're able to bring up so much about the two comings of Christ.
Yeah.
In the lives of these patriarchs. Well, Genesis is the book of beginnings, and that's we talked about in one of our early sessions. It's all there in seed form, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ready to blossom out in the rest of the books of the Bible.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What else do you want to say before we close out this session? And
I just hope that our viewers, as they take this journey with us, I just hope that their understanding is blossoming, as we take them through our thoughts anyway. In your studies, you're in what sermon number are you on now at Liberty?
I think maybe 35 or something. Mm-hmm. I've actually taken a break. There's something about the 1-year anniversary of the shutdown, because really I started preaching these sermons when everything was just going crazy.
Oh, okay.
Everyone's attention was on the virus and on the restrictions, and the election was coming up, and everything was just getting crazy. So I partly chose to start this series of sermons just so that when we come to church, our mind is off all that. And we're just looking for Christ.
Yeah.
In the stories of the people of the Old Testament. But something about, and I got through Genesis and Exodus, and I was starting Leviticus. And I don't know, something about that 1-year anniversary. And partly because I did this to the church Sunday. I held up this 3x5. I have these little notepads, little 3x5 sheets. And over the last year, while I was developing those sermons, I was studying other things, and other sermon ideas were coming to mind, all that. So I have like a couple of hundred of those. Maybe has a scripture and maybe one or two thoughts. And you know how it is.
Yeah.
And they're all piling up, and I'm sticking them on my Bible. And Sunday I preached on Ephesians 3:21. Broke it down into, it's a statement about glory. Unto him be glory. There's not even, the word be is in italics, kind of a verbless sentence. The verb is implied. It's really unto him the glory. They left the definite article out. So that really the central idea is the glory.
The glory
of God. And then it's surrounded by 4 prepositional phrases. Unto him, in the church, by Christ Jesus, throughout all ages. And I approach that with that, the basic rules of interpretation: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Because you can ask all those are answered in that verse.
Wow. Yeah.
And So it just worked out real well. It's just a fresh, a little different, but I think maybe more correct approach to Ephesians 3:21. I did hit real hard on, the prepositional phrase in the church as the place, the where, who, what, where. Mm-hmm. But I also hit hard on that's not the only thing in that verse. Mm-hmm. Most of us as preachers, and when we hear other preachers quote it, it's as if in the church is the only thing in the verse.
Right.
Because we're hammering on that part so much.
Yes,
and it is important.
Yeah.
But don't leave off the unto him part.
Absolutely.
Don't leave off. So it's unto him and it's by him, the glory. So the glory in the church he is the recipient of it, but he's also the source of it. Yeah,
see, that mistake was already made with Israel and the Pharisees, so we don't want to repeat that one.
Yes. So they emphasized in the temple, in the temple, in the temple.
Yeah.
And they left off the importance of their Messiah. And then how long? Throughout all ages. There's that idea of all ages. But it worked out real well. Mm-hmm. And so those kind of sermon ideas have been coming to me over the last year. I've been writing down these little notes.
Right.
And part of my stick on my Bible, because my desk is so full of other piles of stuff. And so I've got
turn the camera around so our viewers can see.
No. The problem is in my Bible, I have stuff all the way through. Like, for instance, that one on Ephesians 3:21, I had it stuck in my Bible in Ephesians 3. So every time I came for other reasons to read Ephesians 3, there's that note.
There's that note,
You need to preach me someday.
Yeah, there you go.
The problem is I got about 100 of them scattered through my Bible. So the binding, backing of my Bible's breaking down.
Oh, my.
I have so much stuff stuffed in there. And then I got piles on my desk. Yeah. So my point is that so many other sermons calling out for me.
Yes.
I decided to take a break.
Yeah.
And preach on those until something inside of me.
Yeah. Well, then when you get back to it, it'll be fresh.
Maybe it'll be fresh again.
Yeah.
So
that's a good strategy.
I don't, especially people who only, always, or whatever, preach expositorily through a book, or something.
Yeah.
And that's my method of preaching a lot, but like Ephesians 3:21, the points are already there outlined for you.
Yeah.
So it's preach it expositorily, but it's anyway.
Now, did it stay in pencil form, or did you type it up?
I typed it up.
Did you?
With a lot of pencil marks on the type, which I have to clean up before I send it to you. But I will make a note to myself, stick it on some pile on my desk, clean up Ephesians 3:21 sermon to send to Mike.
Okay, thank you. You can't even mention this without me coming back.
If the any experience, along with my what's that word where you put things off?
Procrastinate. Yes.
I don't even like to mention it because I'm so guilty of it.
Yes.
I hope to get to that one day, Mike.
You've got a lot of irons in the fire, but
no cows are getting branded.
Right. Anyway, good session, brother.
Yeah, good session and good talking to you. And hope you have good service tonight.
Yeah.
Who's teaching?
Noah's teaching, so he's got another couple of weeks or so. So he's doing a really good job. We always like.
I've listened to several of his.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember now what he's teaching on right now.
Yeah, it's kind of just a spray of things, whatever kind of comes to mind. Okay. I think tonight might be redemption or whatever. It was like 3 R's. So, but he always gets us to talk, and and that's what we like. We like generate a discussion. So he'll kind of get the ball rolling, and people will feed off of what he brings. So we like that.
It's good on Wednesday nights to be more relaxed that way.
It is, yeah.
We're still one of our members wanted us to go through John 13 through 16 together.
Yeah.
So we expanded it, and we just finished 17, the prayer.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Now we're going to finish the Gospel of John together.
Oh, okay.
So I've given them the assignment, because John 18 starts with them going over the brook Kidron into the Garden of Gethsemane, and it has Judas coming. So John leaves off completely the prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. So I told them, as we go through the rest of John, they're going to have to be filling in the gaps from Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Yeah.
Yet none of them record the great lesson in John 13 through 17. The rest of them leave that off completely.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to read all 4 gospel books to get the clear picture. And we have Brother Worski's Harmony of the Gospels that some of us have been referring to, and I have other Harmony of the Gospels. There's a lot of them out there.
I don't have Brother Worski's book. I don't know if he has an extra copy somewhere. Maybe Brother Jed will bring one when he comes.
Yeah, why don't you drop me an email?
Yeah, ask him to grab a copy if he's got an extra one. Yeah,
because he worked hard on that. It's really good. I forget where I have mine now.
And it's just typed up on a typewriter, or is it digital? Do you know?
No, it's just in a book form. Yeah, it's not digital. He did this 25 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. I need to get a copy of that.
And you look at the different harmony of the Gospels, and they don't always even agree with each other.
Yeah.
It's hard to know exactly the order of things.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's nice to glean off of someone's labor that put the time into, try to piece it together, So. Okay.
Well, until next session.
All right.
Hasta la vista.
Yeah. Hasta la vista.
Brother.
Take care. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah.